I wanna say thank you for the opportunity. I definitely miss the Mosaic gatherings. When I joined Trinity, we were the Mosaic Fellowship, and it evolved into the Mosaic Gathering. And Mosaic gatherings were such a blessing to me, and the support that I got throughout my school years were wonderful, and forever thankful for everyone that has um, seasoned me into who I am. You know, I had a professor in my doc program who would say, I want to season my students, and I was definitely seasoned at TEDS and TIU, and I'm forever thankful for all the growing and the opportunities, and the grace and the love and the care that I was giving in my time there. So thankful to be back and be able to share a little bit with you this morning. I want to maybe add a little more before I show my PowerPoint. And one of the things that I would like to share is that in the last few years, the practice that I'm a part of, Whitestone Counseling Practice, has made an effort to really be more involved in the Latinx community. There's about 2 million people who identify as Latinx in Cook, McHenry, and Lake County. And we have seen such a need for professional counseling services to be able to, provide the support and counseling to this community. And I think when it comes to just our minorities and people of color, it's such an important thing for there to be space for us to be able to process our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and learn to become whole and congruent and authentic in who we are and how God made us to be. The Latinx community is huge. There's about, I'm gonna go ahead and share my PowerPoint. There's about there's about 60.6 million individuals in the states who currently identify as Latinx individuals. Quite an increase from 2008. Many of these young Latino families are having children, so we're seeing a lot of children be part of the school system. And we're also noticing that there's an increase of more individuals coming to this wonderful country, in some way seeking opportunities, crossing the border. So it's expected that the number of individuals who identify as Latinx is only going to climb. Now, some of the projections on this is that by the year 2016, there will be about 119 million individuals who identify as Latinx, which will account for about 28.6% of the population in the United States. And one of the things that I enjoy about who I am as part of my Latinx identity is spirituality. We as individuals, we as Latinx individuals consider spirituality to be such an important part of who we are, that we take it into account in everything that we do. Because it in our thought process, spirituality is not who we are, or religion is not who we are, but rather who we are as a person. Meaning it's not something that we do, but it's something that reflects us as individuals. And one of the things that I tend to see with the people that I work with in my practice is that a lot of them will come and they will share with me. In this semester, I was teaching counseling the Latinx families and couples class at Trinity, and one of the things that we were bringing up is, that every time we say something with our families or friends, we will end up the conversation with if God allows, if it's God's will, because everything that we do in our decisions in our life is filtered through our belief in God having our best interest in mind. To the point that some of the research would say that for those that come across, the border, they come and they have this belief system that if they are brought here and they make it safely, it's because God had, a purpose for them in doing so, and they got protected their journey. And our spirituality is really, it can be traced back to our ancestors. The Aztecs, the Mayas, the Ainos, and one of the things that I have really enjoyed about my identity is that it has been a process too, in learning to accept me for who I really am. Part of an individual is this identity model of development, where we go from point A of understanding what it means to be biracial, bicultural, in a place that we feel at times that we don't belong in. And I share a little bit of my story at one point in one of our classes where I was sharing about my own identity development as Latinx individual, becoming whole. And I was telling the class that at one point I felt that I didn't really want to be who I was. I didn't want to be brown because my color was associated with being a gang member, or being a bad person in some way. That me growing up, I decided that I wanted to wear dress clothes in high school. I was the most well-dressed in high school in my thought process, because I didn't want to be assigned or labeled as being just a statistic, a gang member. And I made every effort to kind of show myself as being different. And so all of these things are considered as we go from, feeling isolated and alone to become part of a community and whole again in some way. And so one of the things that I want to really just make an effort is that when it comes to counseling, I think it's important for us to consider spirituality and spirituality development, because it really helps us become whole and understand how we were made and how wonderful we are made. All of us are made wonderfully. I'm reminded most of the time when I think about this, I'm reminded about Psalm 139 that says that God saw me be knitted together in my mother's womb, that He knows me so well that He knows what I'm about to say before I say it, and it's so important for us to know how intimately God knows us. But sometimes we struggle with the thought and the belief of who we are and whether we are fully good enough. And we struggle with this idea of what wholeness can look like if we are seeking it in some way. When it comes to spiritual development, a lot of definitions have three components through spiritual development. One is the aspect of having the sacred, the divine, a higher power, or the transcendent, having this belief or this piece of there being a higher power, there being a God. And the second piece to it is, how can we relate to this higher power? How do we relate to this higher power? How do we share space with God in our case? And then what's the purpose and meaning? What is a connection that our high power, God can help us understand and what our role is in this world, and how can we relate with others in our lives? Because a lot of the times, what I tend to see in my counseling practice is that we have a difficult time not only relating to God, but we have a difficult time relating to others. And then we also have a hard time relating to ourselves. Because sometimes we can become so focused on the goodness of others that we forget about our own wellness. We forget about our self-care. And so I want us to be mindful about that. And so the journey in my thought process to wholeness is considering three facets. And the facet of what spiritual development will look like is that it could be the inner work that we most of us will need to do. And the inner work begins with a deep within process. And what the process looks like is that we need to peel ourselves from anything that might be obstructing us and become whole again. Some of the research that my Mycelis and Russo has done, when they did a qualitative study, and some of the participants that they quoted were saying, like, the understanding what was deep within, I had to do some inner work in reflecting what was causing my fears, where I was incongruent with myself. Because a lot of the times we can say things, but we might be doing something else. And the deep within is this search in ourselves that is helping us become authentic and congruent by peeling things that are a burden to us, that are fear-driven, or that are creating some anxiety in some way. The up and beyond facet is this development of learning to become more aligned and closer to God, and understanding his purpose for us in our lives. A lot of the times we might become a little stuck here because we might wonder, what is it that God has in store for me? And one of the things that I do with the clients that I work with is asking them really what their relationship with God is like. To this point, I think it's hard for us to process that it's okay for us to become angry at God for what is happening sometimes in our world. Most of us feel that we can't, because if we are mad at God and lamenting what is happening, that means that we might not want to be true followers of him. And they struggle with this thought process of, how can I be more congruent with my faith and my spirituality and understanding my relationship with God in some way? So the second facet is really about working in our personal relationship with God. The third facet is really encouraging us to think about what our relationship with others could look like. Because growing in our spirituality is not just understanding who we are, but becoming whole by relating healthy with other people in our lives. I hope I made sense. I know I might have scrambled a little bit, and I apologize for that. But really what I'm trying to say is this. If we are working on becoming whole, there are three things that we really want to consider. One is our own story. What is happening in our story? What is happening in our lives around us that is creating a burden in our lives? One of the things that I taught in my class this semester was transgenerational trauma. That goes from family to family, from society to society, from generation to generation. And one of the things that I brought up in class was some of the transgenerational trauma that many immigrants endure as they're coming to this country. Some of the women get assaulted in the border, children are separated from their families. And if we don't process some of those things by looking within us and expressing our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, there's a book out there titled "The Body Keeps the Score." And the author states that if we don't process some of our traumas, they tend to sneak back into our lives through some sort of physical, emotional, psychological discomfort. And so it's so important for us to process that. This week, I was traumatized through different means. One was looking at this video from, this people smuggler at the border, kind of throwing two girls from the wall, dropping them about 30, I think it was 10 feet down. And one of the girls was 3 years old and the other one was 5. And then he ran away. He left them at the border alone. And me thinking about that and saying, wow, how can a person leave a 5 and a 3-year-old alone at night to fend for themselves? And I was traumatized as I saw that video of those 2 girls being dropped from the fence, from the wall. And I was re-traumatized by looking at some of the videos this week about, these 2, Black individuals, African American individuals being killed and harassed because of that vicarious trauma that we experience by seeing these videos. And so it's important for us to look at ourselves and say, okay, how is this creating, I'm going to use the word burden, but I think I mean something different. How is this creating a burden in where I am in my own walk, in my own self-care? How do I process that in a way that I can share it with the people that I care and love, so that I can heal from my own experience in what I saw? How do I lament in fellowship in group? how do I take care of myself as we continue to look at all these videos and hear stories of people suffering and struggling on a daily basis. The second part is how do I go to God with these thoughts, feelings, and emotions? And the third is how do I create healthy relationships with people in my life so that we can together walk through this? And the deep within look sometimes requires us to do a couple things. And I like this table, and the table kind of walks us through what the author would consider healthy things for us to practice in our lives so that we can do what God intended us to do and live how God intended us to live. One is learning to accept who we are, learning to forgive me and others and accept God's grace into my life. Because if we don't accept us for who we are, then we experience rejection and unacceptance. And then we also practice not accepting others for who they are. But if we can get to a place that we accept us for who we are, our flaws, our mistakes, the struggle of sin in our lives, then it helps us be able to connect with God, us, and others in a healthy way. The other thing is learning to belong. I talk with some people of color who are professionals, and one of the things that we tend to process a lot is imposter syndrome. And one of the things that comes up is I don't belong in my job. I don't belong in my work. I don't belong in my profession. Some people that I work with in families will tell me I don't belong in this family. I'm not good enough for this family. I'm not good enough for this relationship. But if we can get to this place of belonging in all that we do, in who we are, then it allows us to truly fellowship with those that are part of our lives. The third is competence. If we can get to a place of knowing that we are competent, I think it helps us be able to also, live in this world, understanding that we're not part of it, but we do live in it. And it allows us to kind of notice the difference between our purpose in this world and not feeling like we are part of this world. The fourth is equity. The fall led to injustice. And what we aim to grow in is to seek unity and justice within the church and the world. The fifth is significance. When we don't get to this place of knowing our significance, there's a feeling of worthlessness. If we can get to significance, then we're able to understand our value of who we are as individuals. What is your value? Do you accept your value? Do you accept your worth? A lot of the times when I process this with individuals, I ask them, where does your worth come from? Some will know that it comes from how, what their productive is and how productive they become, how many hours they work or how much money they make. Our worth comes from us just being us, being humans, being born. My youngest is a year, and all she did the first few months of living was eat, poo and pee, but she had so much worth. She had so much worth, and she still has so much worth because our worth comes from us being born and being part of this world and being us human beings. The sixth is security, right? When we don't experience security, we then experience insecurity and anxiety. And if we can get to a place of knowing that the love that we have from God and the love where we can experience meaningful, authentic, congruent relationships can make us feel secure. One of the biggest complaints that I get from the couples that I work with is that they don't feel secure in the relationship. And one of the things that I tell them is that in my thought process, there's 4 kind of pillars to a healthy relationship. And these 4 pillars come from the Marriage and Family book by the Baldwins. And the first pillar is unconditional love. Unconditional love gives me an opportunity to be who I am. Grace allows me to know that if I make a mistake, people will love me and give me grace. The fourth is empowerment. Just like God empowered women, children, the sick, and a lot of characters in the Bible, we want to empower those that we do relationship with. And the fourth is emotional intimacy. And this is seen in our relationship with God, because we are unconditionally loved by God. He gives us grace, He empowers us, and He knows us. He knows how many hairs we have. He knows what we're about to say before we say it. The only way that we can get to security is by being in relationship with those that we feel really love us, by unconditionally loving us, by giving us grace, by empowering us, and by getting to know us. The last one is transcendence. And this thought process is learning to live by acknowledging God's presence in our lives, by worshiping God and celebrating victory over sin, that even with all of this that is going on in our lives, God is in control and He will give us victory at the end. He will have victory at the end. When I was in Mosaic, one of the things that for some reason would provoke anxiety is when I would hear Brother Daniel pray and said, Lord, have your kingdom come. And I process that a lot. And one of the things that I've come to realize is that I do want, God's, kingdom to continue to come to this world. And I didn't fully understand that until I did some of this own personal work in me. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of us can struggle in some of these, psychological, spiritual needs. Some of us might struggle with accepting us for who we are, or fully feeling like we belong in group, school, academia, or whatever it might be. We might struggle with competence, seeking justice, our identity, our significance, our security in our relationship with God. One of the psychological strengths in the Latinx community is what we call esperanza, which is hope. And to me, that psychological strength is so meaningful, because at the end of the day, no matter what the Latinx individual, couple, family goes through, there is this feeling that there's a better tomorrow. There's hope to come. And I've come to understand that as well, that at the end of the day, there's hope. And part of what counseling is providing hope to those that come to see us. No matter where in their journey, their quest, or in their work they are, it's important for us to provide hope. And I would encourage you all to provide hope when you talk to those that you talk with, or you share a coffee, a meal with. Provide hope, because there's hope in God, there's hope in Christ. Thank you, Brother Daniel. I would like to encourage you to screenshot this, because it's going to be part of a question. If you would like to screenshot it, that way you have the list of things that you can go through in your conversations.